Laura Holyoke again, back here with your second out of 3 YouTube videos recorded PowerPoints. This time I'm talking about the trifocal family and groups. Family and group lens. So remember that the trifocal refers to 3 different areas of a lens. We talked about personal, which is the human beings, what's different and similar about people. And today we're going to talk about family and groups and what is going on there. And then my next one will be about the medical, clinical, organismic part of the lens. So the family and group lens is really concerned with internal functioning and what groups have to pay attention to, not only in organizations, as we live quite a bit in organizations and the people around us, but also this is pretty much true in groups of people, friends, and within families. Several elements are included and are important to look at in the family and group lens. Your book, Bowman and Deal, do talk about some of these, but I'm going to talk about some additional ones here. The stages of development. We're going to talk about boundary permeability, in-group and out-group dynamics, task and maintenance functions that need to happen within groups, and trust and social capital. So before we start, though, I want to just say a couple things about group dynamics. That Kurt Lewin, one of the founders of OD, was also tagged with the founder of group dynamics. So it's a field of study, social sciences, focus on the nature of groups. We all have an innate need to belong, and groups help us belong. They help identify who we are, our attitudes, and groups often influence who we are. Groups may have good, healthy influences on us or not so good influences. One of the areas that groups need to pay attention to, and this is not talked about much, is that every group, and I'm just going to talk about work groups for now, have task and maintenance functions that need to be attended to. They need to set boundaries around these. So in terms of task, the group has to get their task done. And it's important to have constant improvement, to do their task efficiently and with good quality. Likewise, groups also need to take care of or maintain the group as it is. So effective decision-making capabilities and implementing those decisions. Individual response to the group, that is, the group to protect itself from any harmful individuals. It's important for them to care about one another and to treat one another with dignity. And then the ability for a group to resolve problems and internal conflicts, or else it would tear them apart. So Robert Bales really writes about task and maintenance functions, and often talks about groups can't do just one or the other. You can't just have a task group without having maintenance functions that maintain it, if you will. So what happens is the recommendation is about 75 to 80% of the time should be spent on task, getting the job or work done. 25 to 30%, or 20 to 30% really, of the time should be spent on maintenance functions. What happens if too much attention to task, it threatens group cohesion and the group falls apart. Too much attention to maintenance and not enough task is getting done. So you can take a look at some groups that you are members of, or even in your organization, and how are you doing on task and maintenance functions? If ever you are in a group and have the time to observe how others communicate, or if you're an outsider watching others communicate, notice a few things, and you can see task and maintenance behaviors happening here. You can also get a flavor of the group by watching the frequency, duration, and content of the verbal communication among the group. Who communicates to whom? And in fact, do they look at them? Do they interrupt them? Does one person constantly interrupt? Does another person just talk to one or two people in the group? Do you notice any triggering patterns, specific responses when something happens in a group? What sort of communication styles do you see? And how about nonverbal communication? What are body postures like? Gestures that people make, facial expressions? So these can help you see the task and maintenance functions that happen in a group. They're certainly fun to do if you are severely bored in a meeting. Just don't let anybody know that you're doing them. Most people are familiar with Tuckman's stages of development: forming, storming, norming, and performing. He came up with these in 1965, and I do have the original article posted under our readings for this lens. So Tuckman says, and many of you, I'm just going to go over this really quick, that forming, the team acquaints and establishes ground rules. How are we going to work together? Formalities are preserved, and members are pretty much treated like strangers. Most of us are often, or we are parts of these groups. They may be committees that we serve on, and the committee may get together once a month. So every time that we get together, we form, and we're still strangers. And the next time, the next month, we get together and we form. Most committees, most groups, unless they work together day in and day out, usually don't get past the forming stage. The storming stage is not infighting. And even the bottom of this, it says that showing hostility. But storming really has to do with being authentic about how you feel, what's going on, and people kind of working out where they are in the group, and because that then leads to norming. People accept others' viewpoints. People accept and to help support others, and then finally performing. I think one of the best ways to look at these 4 stages is in our relationships, especially to look back when we've met a partner and continue to be with that person, to see how, as we grow in our trust with them and to learn one another's strengths, how we can get to the performing stage. I also mentioned this in our last in the last PowerPoint that I did, but groups, to look at groups in terms of the Johari window is something that can tell you quite a bit of information about them. How much information about the groups and individuals within that group is known to others. How often do people have blind areas that we have not given them feedback or helped them improve? Do people keep secrets from one another in that group? Has the group spent enough time discovering together and really working on their maintenance behaviors to shrink that unknown area or undiscovered area? Another something that contributes to group functioning, Lencioni writes about organizational health, but he also wrote about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And he said any one of these 5 can derail a team from getting its task done. So the first one is absence of trust. So this is unwillingness to be vulnerable within the group, not just others, but you including. Secondly is fear of conflict. So group members tend to seek artificial harmony over something that's constructive, debate or passionate. You stand up for what you believe in and and have respect for others as they do that. Lack of commitment to the group, so feigning any sort of buy-in in group decisions. That also creates ambiguity throughout the organization. Avoidance of accountability, well, just ducking on the responsibility to call peers on counterproductive behavior, which sets low standards, and also not holding yourself responsible for what's going on. Finally, inattention to results, focusing on personal success, status, and ego before focusing on what the team is working towards. So I also want to talk about, these are 3 different kinds of group dysfunctions, and I've included articles on both groupthink, the original article, and Irving Janis, the AOLL paradox, which is Jerry Harvey, and then group hijacking, which is what I did for my dissertation. So groupthink is a psychological phenomenon that occurs within a group of people. They really want to get along, conform to the group. They end up making a decision that's pretty irrational or dysfunctional, that nobody questions that decision, and they truly believe that the decision is right, when really the decision needs quite a bit more debate, and may not always be a very good decision. So the AOLL paradox, for you that aren't familiar with it, it's an inability to manage agreement among a group. And it's a core dynamic in group decision making. So the parable is that a married couple and the wife's parents are sitting on a porch in a house in Coleman, Texas. They're playing dominoes, drinking lemonade, watching the ceiling fan, attempting to survive in 104-degree heat. So the wife's father suggests that they drive to Abilene, which is about 53 miles away, to eat at the cafeteria there. Then son-in-law does not want to do this, but rather than make a fuss, goes along with the idea, as do the 2 women. They drive through a dust storm to Abilene in their unair-conditioned 1968 Buick. No one particularly enjoys the mediocre lunch. They drive back to Coleman, grumpy and tired. Later, they discover that none of them really ever wanted to go to Abilene. They all went simply because they thought the others wanted to go. So it's a great example of how we often go along to get along, if we are hesitant to disagree with one another or stand out from the crowd. So double check what it is that you really want to do. Finally, for my dissertation, I did a grounded theory study, and I came up with a group dysfunction archetype called group hijacking. And group hijacking happens in an intact group where norms are set, people are used to how others work, and any member of the group, which could also include a leader of the group, uses one of French and Raven's bases of power coercively. So you can use, because somebody likes you, you have referent power over them, you can use the fact that they like you against them, which is coercive power. So you can use any one of those bases of coercive power. You can use any one of those bases of power coercively against others in your group. The 4th part of the archetype is that you do this to derail or change a direction that the group is headed, a decision that the group has made, and all of a sudden they've been severely derailed or not able to go in that same direction. And it goes against cultural norms. So I found that when this happened in groups, and it does not happen often because if people tend to do it all the time, that is a part of the norm. But when it goes against group norms, the rest of the group was usually like a deer in the headlights, really did not know what to do. These were instances that happened in a day, and the group was so shocked that it wasn't until the end of the day or the next day they realized what had happened. I found that people aligned with either the hijacker or with the group, and much of what I found that it related quite a bit to terrorism literature. So it depends on the perspective of both the hijacker and the onlookers. If a person does something in a group, in an organization, and you believe what that person did, that person's an organizational hero. However, if you look at it as damaging the group or the organization, we label these people as organizational terrorists. That's all I have for you in the family and group lens. I really appreciate you being here.